This morning to read.
All right, it is exactly 3 p.m. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rising Tide. If you've been here before, then welcome back. And if this is your very first time, then we are so glad you are here. We do a monthly webinar here at Full Course just to kind of bring insights to you guys, the restaurant industry, and give us a chance to kind of share what we've learned over our careers with some of you in hopes that you can take it back to your business and make it all that much better. So today, I'm particularly excited because we have a killer panel to share with you guys. We are talking about how women are transforming the restaurant industry with authentic leadership. And we've got the president of Taco John's, Heather Neary, with us. We've got our associate editor of QSR Magazine, Satine Donor, with us. And then we've got Lauren Fernandez, who is the Full Course founder and CEO. And last but certainly not least, we've got Robin Brooks, and she is a CPG executive and advisor. So lots of really great minds on the call today, and I'm very excited to dive into this topic. Erin, can I get you to move to the next slide for us? Oh, look at these beautiful faces. Okay, cool. So to kind of get us started off today, we're going to do what we do every week at our Full Course team meetings and do a one-word check-in. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to just kind of say how you're feeling today, how things are going, in just one word. And then I'd also love for you to share what you feel from your perspective is the biggest challenge that leaders in our industry are facing today. So we're coming right out of the gate. Fernandez, if that's cool, I'm going to kick it to you first.
I am optimistic. That's my one word. Are we just doing our one word share and then we're coming back?
Keep on going. Let's hear that challenge, girl.
I think one of the biggest challenges right now for leaders in the restaurant industry, and this is, I think, where women have a unique opportunity to step up and lean into our empathetic side, is just really understanding the plight of the restaurant owner. 24 was a really rough year for profitability. And I think a lot of franchisors and just in general restaurateurs are struggling with how to kind of solve for that. What are some things that we can do that are really practical that can help?
Cool. Neri, let's hear it. What's your
Hey,
word?
it's so good to see you guys. I love this. This is a fun group. Um, if I'm being totally honest, I'm feeling very tired because I spent the last 4 days in Vegas and woke up there this morning. But I'm back in Minneapolis and ready to tear it up. So I'm feeling hopeful. I think the biggest challenge, Lauren actually stole the word that I have written down in my notebook right here. It's profitability. The biggest opportunity for us in all of our organizations is driving cash to the bottom line while driving top line sales. It's a tough go out there right now.
Yeah, yes, we're definitely hearing that a lot.
Yeah.
In the spirit of Las Vegas, let's hear from Robin.
So my one word today is rain. We finally got rain.
Are you in Vegas, Robin? It was raining when I left this morning at 5.
Yeah. And you know what? I can't believe I didn't know you were here, and Lauren was just there. So we could have had, a little session out this way.
Oh yeah, we could have done our pre-session there.
That's exactly right. I think that one of the biggest challenges facing the industry today is labor, and making sure that your workforce is engaged and performing and wanting to show up at work.
Yeah, yes, that's fair.
Totally true.
Satine, I'm interested in what you have to say on this too, from your perspective as a QSR editor, because you hear from a lot of leaders and what's going on in the industry. What are your thoughts and what's your word of the day?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so happy to be here. And it is definitely an interesting point of view. Specifically, in the past year, I've been hearing from a lot of our women in restaurant leadership, since that's primarily what I do. So let's start with the one word check-in. We are a week away from the second annual Women in Restaurant Leadership Together Summit. So I am feeling emboldened. I'm feeling jazzed.
Ooh,
happening. It's real, right? So I'm super excited, a little bit more than one word. But from my point of view, I'm going to piggyback off of Robin. I think building the right team is one of the biggest issues in this industry. And then from, what I'm hearing is there seems to be a gap between creating meaning and purpose with this disconnected, isolated workforce. I think professionally and personally, people feel more isolated than ever. So how do we, get rid of that fundamental misalignment and really create genuine connections from top to bottom?
Oh, I love that. And it is absolutely so true. And I think it's a really good kickoff into what I was hoping we can kind of chat through today. And for everyone listening in, by the way, I should say, feel free to participate in the chat at any time. We've got Paul Craythorne and Erin Wentang from our team that will help facilitate that conversation and may pop in as well to add their comments. But please do interact. We love that. And this is meant to be just super chill and conversational. So, we've got a bit of an agenda, but if we start vibing in a certain area, then we're going to go with it. Cool. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's all very valid in terms of the challenges that we're facing right now. But thinking about sort of leadership and what we can do about it, I'm really interested to hear y'all's point of view on empathy as it relates to leadership and sort of how that shows up for you in this industry and in your roles. So, Satine, if you don't mind keeping it going since we kind of had you had the floor, that would be great.
Sure. I mean, first things first, I think just in the broader, societal landscape, empathy is a huge problem. And then, certainly empathy and leadership. I think from my point of view, working specifically with women in restaurant leadership, as women in, leaders, we are confronted with this kind of hurtful stereotype that empathy equals weakness, and it certainly does not. Empathy does not equal softness. In fact, I would argue it's harder to treat people with empathy, when you're dealing with self-awareness and strength to be able to actively listen to your team and have empathy and telling them, hey, maybe that this is not right for you. So I think, that's one of the biggest things. And I think empathy also creates this culture of psychological safety with your team. So it certainly should not be overlooked. And I think it's worth, opening up the dialogue and figuring out how we can foster this culture of empathy.
Yeah, what do others think about all that? Like, just jump in, y'all.
Yeah,
I think
I'm gonna throw down the towel on this one because I actually think this is arguably the single largest place that our industry fails, and it's because there are not more women at the table, whether it's managerial level, leadership in brands, even up to the board level. And not to suggest that women are the only ones that can bring that perspective to the table, but I do think it is one of the very telltale symptoms of that lack of gender diversity and openness in our industry. And it's interesting because if you look at demographically how we're stood up in terms of ownership of brands across every type of category, we're slightly more female than we are male. And so I think it's not just about the fact that women can, as leaders, tap those different areas of their brain and bring a little bit more heart into it. It's also just the simple act of understanding what it is to be an employee in a restaurant. And if you haven't ever worked a shift, it's hard to relate to that. But I would submit that perhaps women bring that unique perspective where we can hold space for that understanding and that point of view at the same time that we can still hold and keep accountability and standards and be that kind of leader. And I would submit that the reason this is so important is because we are a people industry. We are the third largest employer in the United States, and half of all of Americans report a restaurant as their first job. And bringing more empathy to that situation, whether you're an hourly wage first timer or you're an OG and you've been doing this for 50 years, I don't care. I do think that those voices and perspectives need to be heard, and the gateway for it is empathy.
I think as women, the challenge for, and I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure I'm not the only one. There's a challenge in the first couple of years of your career, understanding how to show empathy while still being a leader. And I think that is kind of the magic sauce that needs to happen. And it's the combination of like being real. And I think your next bullet point, Lauren, B, was around authenticity. And it's hard to find that balance because as women, we want to make sure that we're not being seen as too emotional or too erratic or too this or too that. And I think that's the challenge that we have to do. And I think one of the things that I've learned is that empathy is just really being who I am. I'm generally a fairly empathetic person, maybe too empathetic at times, but I think it's really what people appreciate about the role that you're playing. And I think as you grow in your leadership, people want you to be honest with them. They want you to be transparent. They want guardrails around what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? Where are my opportunities? What am I supposed to be doing? Like why is my job important in this company? And how does my day-to-day reflect on the overall organization? And so I think all of those things they sound really easy, but I think generally speaking, we are also in a culture that doesn't want to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. And so we maybe over-index in some cases on being too indirect. And I think directness is just such a gift for people. And I think even if it's hard sometimes, the first couple of times, ultimately, hearing that direct feedback from your leader or from a peer, like, hey, can I share some feedback with you, is so important and is really just a gift that you're giving to people. And I think that's a big piece of growing in your career, growing in your leadership journey, is just really showing that direct accountability and feedback to your team to help them grow. Because at the end of the day, people just want to know where they stand. They want some clear direction.
Don't you feel like giving and receiving feedback is easier when you have that relationship, when you
Yeah.
truly believe that person is coming from a place of caring about you?
Where they actually
It's,
know you too. Like when you
yeah,
when you see somebody on your team who's not performing as well as they once did and you're frustrated with them, like the first thing I always do is like, hey, is everything going okay at home? Because maybe something's going on that I don't even know about. Maybe you've got some financial troubles. Maybe there's some relationship issues. Maybe there's, ailing parents, ailing spouse, ailing family members that you're dealing with. And a lot of employees are hesitant to bring that up in the workplace because they don't want to seem like they're not dialed into their work. But at the end of the day, if you're dealing with something super huge outside of work, like let's talk about it and figure out the best way. Because if you're really a good employee and I value you, I want you here through this crisis that is there. And I want to help work with you through that crisis.
Robin, I feel like you were talking about this the other
Well,
day.
I was, and I really think that people really like to be treated the right way, right? They want to know that their work is valued. They want to know that they're doing the work the right way. And so I think a lot of it has to do with what's the culture in the workplace and how comfortable and secure does the employee feel in that particular culture. And I think that, probably one of the things that hurt quite a bit was just the shutdown from COVID, where people were so, dispersed, and we did, a lot of our social relationships and work relationships changed so significantly that it's been really disruptive. And I think it's going to take a while for people to really feel like, they should be reporting to work and engaging 100%. And no, it's not negotiable that you don't come in. You have to come in, right? That's part of the job description. So I think that, I really think that part of it is training and making sure that they feel comfortable with what their assignment is and what their station is. I think that it's often important to solicit feedback from the employee to say, what do you think we could be doing better? Or we just had this terrible customer experience over here. How do we improve that? What do you suggest? Because we want to deliver the best service, right? So that's what I think.
100%. And I think it just reminded me, Satine, when we were talking earlier, you were making a point about normalizing growth through failure. And I thought that was a really good point to go alongside empathy, just understanding that not everything is always going to go the right way. And when you have that empathy and open dialogue and trust and respect with your employees, you can talk about what worked, what didn't, and how to course correct for next time in a really open and transparent and productive way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, I think there's this weird resistance to vulnerability. I mean, God, people act like it's a disease, but I think vulnerability from the top down is key in sort of normalizing it. Now, of course, you don't really, it doesn't have to feel like this echo chamber, right? Where you're too vulnerable, right? Just depends on what your workplace culture is. But I think in this industry, from what I've heard and what I've seen, I mean, there's no chance that everything is going to go perfect. I think you have to normalize failure and look for ways that you can learn from it and seek to find the opportunities in these challenges. Because if not, I think this industry is too wildly chaotic to not have that mindset shift.
I think it's important for um, employees to know what the company's values are, right?
Mhm.
It's like, how do you treat your coworkers? How do you treat the customer? How do you treat, the delivery guys that are coming in and delivering the food? And I think that, I just think that the people are the X factor when you're looking at how to make an organization great. And that means that everybody is buying into the values of the company. They recognize their responsibility to other employees, to the customer, to the stakeholder. And I think that all people, well, all my employees, it was one of these kinds of things where, while it might be a little bit difficult from time to time, I think it's really important to have open, honest communication. And that means that there's going to be, some, attaboys and some psychic pay, and, you did a really great job over here. But then it also means that you're going to have those really tough conversations saying, you know what, we could have done this better.
Mhm.
Let's drill down on that and let's figure out how to handle it better the next time this happens. And sometimes the problems are recurring problems. So those you definitely need to address.
The reality is, Robin, just to continue on what you were saying, the reality is your high performers are going to be high performers, whether they work for you or for somebody else. But your high performers are going to be quick to walk out the door if they see you not addressing issues with other employees. I think that opportunity to really be direct and vulnerable and share that feedback, good, bad, and ugly, like recognize in public and then have those tough conversations in private. Those tough conversations don't get better with time. This is not about a good cheese or a good wine. This is about, like, those things become cancers in your company and people see it, and your high performers end up walking out the door because they're thinking, why am I working so hard when it's okay for Heather, for Billy Bob to continue to act the way he does or to continue to perform the way he does. And so I think it's really important for us as leaders to have those conversations and learn. You said this earlier, but that feedback conversation, like, the more you have it, the less weird or awkward it becomes. And so it just needs to be something that let's just get it out the table. Like, I'm not mad. We just need to have this conversation. And I think a lot of us, depending on where you are in the company and the culture, those conversations are things that are ignored, and that creates toxicity in the organization, like well beyond anything that you can touch or feel or see, but they're kind of the underlying mediocrity that happens in an organization.
So true.
I agree with you that it can generate a lot of drag on the organization if you don't address it and tackle it head on. And going along with that, what I would add is that I just think that you cannot let these problems fester. And it's really not fair to the high performers or the people who are doing their job all the time. It is just not fair. And I think that people like to be in a workplace that shows, fair application of the values and the feedback. And I've actually been in a situation where, one of my workers was struggling a little bit, and this was in the administrative area. And I sat down and talked to her, time and time again. And finally, I told her, I said, you know what, this just isn't working out. You just aren't able to get it done. And I said, so I'm going to have to let you go. And she was actually thankful because she didn't want to resign. She felt like she would be
Wow.
leaving people in a lurch or whatever. And it's like, well, she was very important in the grand scheme of things, not the way she was performing. So, I think that, I think it takes courage to be able to sit down and have those hard, tough conversations and make sure that they're framed using the right tone, right? Because that's where we get into our empathy, right? But using the right tone to say, you know what, I like you or whatever, but this is just not working out, or whatever the adjustment needs to be.
Yeah, I think Robin, those tough conversations in my experience are happening so much more frequently and regularly and contemporaneously with the issue than I've ever experienced in my corporate career, where it may have just been a monthly or even a quarterly review before. And this may admittedly be a function to like our high performing, very small and energetic team that we just kind of have those conversations very quickly. And it's candidly my leadership style to just say the thing, right? But I also am noticing that generationally that seems to me, in my opinion, to be a better way to handle and address these issues. Because look, I'm solidly Generation X, but I am noticing that in younger employees, they are hungry for that kind of interaction and feedback on a regular, more routine basis. And I'm curious, like, if anyone else on the panel has noticed that. And the flip side of this coin, I will say the thing here is, while I have no problem giving that feedback on a regular basis, it is a very fine line between that level of candor, good and bad, to reward the good behavior and to censure the stuff that's not so great, and becoming someone who suddenly is a babysitter, right? Who has too much responsibility for any employee's performance, feelings, etc. And I think sometimes as women, I will just acknowledge that's a hard line for me to draw sometimes. Like, I don't need to have the mom conversation with you if you're having a bad day. Sometimes I need to get my job done, but I want to always have that door open. If your bad day and your life situation is affecting your job at work, like, we need to know about that, and let's make sure we're making accommodations for you. You get what I'm saying? Like, it's
a fine line.
It is a fine line, and it's a little harder, I think, for me to hold sometimes as a female leader. I'm just curious if anyone else has thoughts on that.
I'd love to hear from Satine on this one.
Yeah,
Candidly.
yeah, candidly, as the resident Gen Z here, Lauren, you hit the nail on the head. I do have that desire, and I'm sure I can't be alone in this. I do have that craving for feedback, and I do think it's important to note that you should be checking in on your high performers just because they are hitting their KPIs, doing their job. Like, it's still important, because often I feel like those are the ones that are silently suffering from something like burnout, and those are the ones that are craving that connection, but they kind of just, oh, they're doing their job, just leave them be. But for me personally, I do value that feedback, but I also agree nobody wants to feel like they're being babysat either. So it is a fine line.
I think for me, one of the biggest things, and Lauren Fernandez and I know you and I have fairly similar personalities in many regards. We've worked together in the past, for everybody that's listening. For me, like, I am very businesslike, and there's a lot of work to be done. Let's put our head down and do it. And over the course of my career, I've gotten feedback that, like, hey, like, you can be a human, like, you're not a robot. Like, you can, like, you can come out of your office and like say hi to people at the water cooler and go get coffee. So like those are things that maybe aren't natural to me. Like my inclination would be to like come in and work. But on the other hand, I've learned to like go mingle around the office when it feels like people are talking, and like, I hear my doors open so I can hear people talking, and I make sure I eat lunch in the lunchroom with everybody. And like just the small things that don't sound like they're a big deal, but it gives me a chance to be like, oh, hey, how was your weekend? I think you were going to the NFL football game this weekend. Or like somebody shared with me recently, actually just this past couple of days, that there's an anniversary coming up for them of the death of a loved one. And so like I made a mental note of that to make sure that on that day I reach out to that person and say something, hey, I'm thinking about you today. I know today's a rough day for you. It's those little pieces and those little nuggets of caring and showing that you're invested in them as people, that make all the difference in the world. It's, it's remembering it's their birthday. It's remembering it's their anniversary at Taco John's or Full Course or Women in Restaurant Leadership, whatever your company is. Just remembering those small pieces that really help to create that strong culture of like, hey, we're in this together. And I also think like we had talked about the fact that profitability is being affected and every restaurant brand is hurting. And I think people want to know what's going on. So I operate in a spirit of like a lot of transparency, like a lot of communication and a lot of transparency around, hey guys, it's going to be a rough year. Like I've said that more than once to my team, and we have all employee meetings once a month. And, we're really transparent about, hey, we're going to all need to buckle down. We've got a lot to get done this year, and it's going to be a rough ride. Like we're going to probably have some peaks. So we're going to probably have some valleys, and we need to work through those things together.
One of the things that you said, although I know this wasn't the point of what you were sharing, is like that someone gave you that feedback about coming out of your office, and like what that says about you as a leader, that not only do you give great feedback, but you're willing to receive it as well. And how that's part of that loop, right? Is like the type of people that are willing to hear it are typically better at giving it. And it's a great way to like practice what you preach and live those values and not just talk about them. So again, I know that wasn't what you were going for, but as someone who like thinks you're a badass, that's what I heard. And also just wanted to say we've got some conversation going in the chat. Richard, thank you for pointing this out, that what you do not say or do also speaks very loudly. And Jeremy made a point earlier about how he's got a few women that he looks to during difficult situations for advice and navigating, and that empathy that they provide helps sort of strengthen his message and impact. And just, acknowledging that role that empathy plays in the things that he's been dealing with. But I did want to get back to Heather, you were saying kind of about the difficult times and being honest about what's going on. And this was one of the things we kind of talked about earlier too, was letting your team be part of the solutions and getting that buy-in. I think Erin Wentang on our team was actually chatting about this with me the other day, because it's something that we try to do at Full Course a lot. It's just like, all right, here are the issues. Like, let's, what Lauren always says, say the thing, and we get it out there and we're like, all right, what are the solutions? We're on our team, we're not allowed to bring problems to the table without solutions.
Actually a rule that I started with my kids, like talk about bringing your working parent energy, your mom energy to work. And that's just something that we've done from the beginning at Full Course. Listen, here's the thing is I'm not necessarily interested in sitting around and talking about all the problems. We come to the meeting understanding what the problem is, and I want everyone's brain around the solutions. We are a solution-oriented company. That's just part of my pragmatic and very optimistic nature. And look, I will say this, I have the fortune of being able to create a company that fits me and my leadership style because I built it that way. But I also built a team that manages to my weaknesses, right? Which is my brain immediately jumps to the logical, what I think is the logical solution, and I get tunnel vision. And I need everyone else to kind of force me to think about a broader set of results. And this goes to a question someone else just raised in the chat, which is like, how do you encourage feedback and that kind of engagement from your team? And I think the answer is, you don't just say we're going to be transparent and say the thing and we're going to do this. You actually have to do it as a leader as well. Completely. And that means like holding the mirror up and saying, am I actually living the actions that I'm asking everyone else to do? Which I would submit that if you are building to perfect alignment and you're building a set of values that you want your company to be about, and you can show up authentically as that's half the battle, right? Like if you can just show up as yourself at work, and it's not a whole thing like, oh, am I being transparent today? Did I get feedback from the team today? It's built into and systematized in the way we live at our jobs every day. And to me, that creating it as institutionalized is the way that you make that livable, because then it's easy for people to show you with their actions, right?
Yeah. Lauren, I'll add to that. Like you had the benefit of creating your own company and building things around you. I joined Taco John's about a year ago. And so I walked into a 55-year-old company with a lot of like long tenured employees with great legacies in the organization. And I had my ideas about how I wanted things to do. So like, it's a matter of like shifting that culture to be more transparent. And you talked about, it's not just saying you're transparent, and there's little cues that you give to your employees that let them know that you're actually living that value, whether it's transparency or integrity or kindness, whatever that looks like. But I think for a lot of people, like things like my calendar's like unhidden, like, you know how you can look at people's calendars, like, and my first month here, somebody's like, hey, just FYI, your calendar, people can see everything on your calendar. And I was like, I don't care. Like, there's nothing to hide. Like, if there's a private meeting that I need to have, I've marked it confidential already and nobody else can see it. But that's just a cue that like, I don't have anything to hide. Like, here's where we're at. Let's talk about this. Let's get it out there. And so I think things like that are important to like develop that transparency. I've been talking about the 5 C's here since I got here. And it's about consistency. It's about collaboration. It's communication. It's culture. And then super cheesy. Don't throw anything at me right now. But the 5th C is kindness, because obviously kindness doesn't begin with a C. But it's really about, I know, right, Lauren? It's really about just like talking about those things. And it's funny because now that like I've been saying it a lot, people are like, oh, we really need to be consistent here. Like, you know, how your C's, like we need to be consistent. We need to do this. Like we need to collaborate with franchisees. We need to make sure we've considered all stakeholders in a conversation so that whatever the decisions is being made, are there unintended consequences for how the decision was made, and making sure that we're addressing that up front. But it's building that muscle around what that looks like to shift a culture. So you had the benefit of building it around you and bringing people in that were exactly who you wanted, which is super awesome. And you've got an incredible team, because I worked with almost everybody on your team. But then you also, like, not all of us have that benefit. So we have to figure out how to work within the frameworks of the organizations that we're in and figure out the right things to push on and the right things to sit back on for a period of time, because you can't walk into a new organization, whether you're coming in as a manager or a specialist or a director or a VP or whatever your title is. You can't walk in and reinvent the wheel. You've got to kind of absorb the culture and do a lot of listening, and figure out where is the best place for you to make your mark.
And I think that's a good point too, about like, don't make people guess what you're looking for or what you're about. You come in and you say it's the 5 C's. You know, at Full Course, our values are thrive. We also did a little acronyms. It's helpful to remember. Do you remember when Russ joined Focus Brands? That was one of the first things that he did, was came in and he's like, this is what I'm about. This is what my expectations are. Like, you don't have to wonder or guess. It's not a secret. He's not trying to trick you. Like, just put it all out there. I'm sorry, Robin, I think I cut you off.
That's okay. I was just going to say, I don't think that there's any problem in bringing your team together, or whatever the representative group is, to say, you know what, X, Y, and Z just happened, and I have to tell you that I am very disturbed by it. And I'm disturbed by it because boom, boom, boom. And I really don't ever want to see it again. And usually I will say that, or when I have said that, it's been because it is in direct conflict with the values of the organization. So I just keep coming back to values, and your 5 C's are pretty much, the values of your organization, and you expect everybody to get that. And I think that the more and more people are able to embrace that and really internalize it and say, this is the way we do things at our workplace, it makes for a much, much better cohesive operating environment.
Yeah. I think just to encouraging that feedback piece, I know we've been encouraging, like I did one-to-ones with every employee in the first couple of months that I was here, and learned a lot and heard some common themes, which help me develop, like, what are my immediate needs here at Taco John's, and what are the things that I can wait 3 or 4 or 5 months to do. But, you know, we've been doing employee engagement surveys once a quarter. And I heard a comment, we just did one in January. I heard a comment that somebody said, well, I heard somebody didn't fill it out because they were afraid you could track their IP address. And I was like, oh my gosh. First of all, if I have time to do that, I've got other issues. But second of all, like that person, that concerns me. Like I want to find out what's going on with that person, that they don't have the trust that we're really trying to develop here. Because, you know, I want your feedback, and you can be anonymous or not. Like you can come into my office any day and tell me exactly what you're thinking, because I want to hear about it. But that really kind of was like, okay, we still have some work to do here. We still have some things we need to keep working on, because, you know, it's been a year that I've been here, and the fact that somebody still is concerned that I'm going to be digging into somebody's IP address on their feedback that they gave is like, that's concerning to me, but it's something that we need to work on. And so somebody else was honest enough to come and share that with me. And so it's like, that's in my brain, and that's kind of like, okay, how do we address that?
Yeah, that's real. I mean, I think, you know, one of the things we were talking about related to empathy is just that piece about building trust, how important that really is, and loyalty with your employees. And we kind of were chatting about this before, and Satine, I think you brought up just the value of somebody going to bat for you. And I want you to kind of talk a little bit more about that. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, sure thing. So if anyone is, unfamiliar with my story, last year this time, and when Whirl came around, I was standing in the back of the room. I was an intern. I was literally scared for my life because I had no direction. I thought I had to have it all figured out. I was like, what the heck am I gonna do? I have no clue where I'm going. And to have leadership kind of help me work through those feelings and sort of mentor me and guide me, and then also like have such a close understanding of my potential and where I wanted to go and what my like intrinsic goals were and how that could benefit the company and the brand, and then turn around and create a pathway to opportunity for me. That is exactly how I got my job at Whirl. This role was created for me, and I cannot tell you how grateful I was when I walked across that graduation stage. I was sending pictures on graduation stage to my work group chat. They all on a
Yeah.
Saturday. I was
That's
sending
so awesome.
yeah, and it just was, I've never felt that way before, to where my leadership, mentored me, took me under their wing, were willing to, fight for me and go to bat and stand in my corner. And because of that, speaking from an employee perspective, I will give them 300,000% every time, because they were willing to take a chance on me and invest in me. And they saw that potential because they looked deeper than my resume, they looked deeper than my job title, and they saw like who I was as a person, and then, created a pathway for me.
You know,
You've got a
we
fangirl in the chat, Satine. Somebody says, "Oh, Satine, you're so
Hi, Mary.
impressive."
so what's really remarkable about that situation, I think, is that it sounds like Satine, it evolved in a very informal way, right?
Yes, I remember
And
us talking about this. Yep.
yeah, and I think one of the things that can make organizations really great is if they can almost design into their protocols, a way to formalize that process where it's not only, where the employee is not only scored by, what their specific job responsibilities are, but you also take some time during that performance review to actually say, what do are you satisfied? What do you want to do? Where do you think you can go? How can you grow in the organization? And you talk about those kinds of things, and then put them on a path to achieve that particular goal or that next step. And I think that, first of all, you may not end up keeping everybody if you do that, but they will always remember you as being a very, very good leader, mentor, almost confidant, if you will, and supervisor in some kind of way. And I have been so blessed because I have had people to reach out to me throughout my career from all segments, be it, one of my suppliers. Like when we first got into the poultry processing business, one of my suppliers reached out to me, and he wasn't even, it wasn't like the sales guy. This was like the executive vice president of something, something, something. And he said, you know what, let's sit down. And he came with his, his picture of the chicken. And we talked about all the different cuts of the chicken and how the parts are priced, why it's priced that way, because some of it goes to Asia and other it stays right here, and there's the greatest demand for the white meat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he knew that this was a new area for me and that I could use that kind of perspective. And we ended up becoming very, very dear friends. And I've had multiple people reach out to me in that kind of way. And it is not, it's great when it comes from inside the organization, but it's also very meaningful when it comes from outside of the organization or from a customer. So, for example, if you're getting your customer feedback and somebody is able to say, hey, Melissa at the register was just really friendly and nice and everything else, it's nice to give that person a shout out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, another point that you had made when we were talking before, around this topic was about noticing people. So you were saying how, when you're having those informal or formal feedback conversations, if you're paying attention to your team members and what they're really great at, and you can call that out and say, like, I've noticed that you are really awesome at doing X, Y, and Z, and perhaps you'd be a great fit in a, growing into this sort of a role. And I was sharing that Lauren did that to me actually at Full Course, where she was like, I've noticed that you're an integrator for this team. And I was like, oh, see, like, I never noticed that about myself. But when she called that out and said it was something that the team needed, that helped me see that and lean into it even more. So I think it's like, thinking about feedback in both the positive and the negative, and just like how you pay attention to people and what they're great at, like, really means a lot to people, I think, in terms of, in addition to what you were saying, which is just like, how can I help? Asking that very important question, no matter where you are in an organization.
I think my overriding objective when I was running my business was I really just wanted people to feel very comfortable in our environment, know that they had a place, and know that they understood their job. But I think that the more you can communicate with them, not only about the values of the organization, but where we're going and how we need your help to get there, is very, very important. Excuse me.
Yeah, Robin, I think you said something a little bit earlier about the career pathing and that kind of conversation. One of the things that I've recently had a couple conversations with people about is that, we're a smaller organization here at Taco John's, for example. Like, we're not an Inspire Brands that has lots of different places you can go in your career, like a Yum brand, you can jump from Taco Bell to KFC to whatever. So one of the things, like, in some cases, I've got some really great people on my team, and the next step for them is probably not here, it's somewhere else. And I think having that transparent conversation with them, like, hey guys, I'm here to help you. Like, I've been around for a long time. I know a lot of people. If you're ready to move on in your career because we don't have that next position for you and you're ready for it, like, let's also have those honest conversations too, because those are important to have people grow in their career. Like, people are loyal to you, and that's super important. And you also need to honor that loyalty by doing the right thing by them and not keeping them in a role that they're past that role. They're ready for something more.
I mean, I think that goes into the other thing is like, helping them get to the next role, whether it's with you or without, but investing in your team in their professional development. Like, perhaps you don't have the opportunity to move them up by way of pay
Right.
or title, but you can train up their skills and help them learn things that they can take with them to their next role. Fernandez,
Yes,
were
and
you about to jump in?
yeah, I wanted to say one thing in particular, which is my advice to young women who are coming up in any industry is to be constantly raising your hand and asking stakeholders who are well above your pay grade what you can help them with.
Yeah.
And it's funny being in this seat now, I view one of my biggest challenges is timely delegation, right? And we have one-on-ones with the team, and one of the questions that is on the agenda every single time is me asking them, what can I help you with? But then there's the question comes back to me, so that they're quite literally prompted to raise their hand and ask, is there something we can take off your plate, Lauren? Is there something we can help you with? Which, as a leader, and I would just hazard a guess that a lot of the women on this call are this way too, is we are very good at doing a lot. We are very accustomed to doing 4 to 5 times as much as the average human to get seen, to get heard, to get promoted. And we do it all with grace and a ton of dignity, and not just a small amount of class, shall we say, right? Okay, so that said,
Amen.
when you get to the top and you're still carrying this enormous daily professional, personal, mental, emotional load, you forget that an important part of bringing up people behind you is letting go and trusting them, that even if they fail at the thing you've delegated, because maybe you didn't delegate it well, or maybe they weren't trained yet, is you are giving them an opportunity to learn and to fail up and to learn from that situation. And I think that's one of those things. It is become such an institutionalized thing for us at Full Course. It's literally the sign that's over my desk. None of you can see it, but I stare at it every day. It's like, when you don't delegate things, you're hoarding the opportunities. And that's something that even for women coming up, think about, like, what can I take? What can I help a leader with? Because they will become loyal to me, and vice versa. But it works the other way too, I think.
Yeah. Well, Lauren, just to go off of what you said too, it's not just delegating, but it's also giving the person you've delegated to some level of ownership in that particular task.
Exactly.
And so just because it's not, and this is something that I've had to learn, so I'm fully admitting my own fault. Just because it's not how I would have done it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's different. And if the end goal was accomplished, it doesn't matter what happened between A and Z. It matters that we started at A and we got to Z, and that's okay. And so I think that's another like key learning too, as we grow in our careers. At least that was something I had to learn, was just because it wasn't done the way I would have done it doesn't mean that it was done wrong. It was just done differently, and that's fine too.
And then I wanted to call it, Richard in the chat was suggesting a tool called On a Roll.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, you know about this one, right, Lauren? I don't think I've used this, but I know you've talked about it before. That
Yeah.
helps
So
with
like,
automating recognition. Is that right?
yeah, there are some tools that are really great in not just corporate environments, but also in the restaurant environment themselves. And I think if you have come up from a restaurant operations background, that spot reward is where it's at. And so to me, apps are great, that's fine. And one of the things that On a Roll and some of its competitors do is they allow employees to essentially convert points to experiences and other things that are more meaningful to them. So if you are struggling with what the reward should look like, those apps are phenomenal. If you haven't yet done this and empowered your team to give the shout out, to call out the wins, to instantly kind of reward the behavior, sometimes it's just as simple as empowering that in the budget for your managers, right? Sometimes it's got to be built into an agenda so that people remember to call out the wins that week and to give a shout out to a teammate. And I know that sometimes that can feel a little fake to people, but the prompt is just a prompt. You're not asking someone to give a shout out when it's not deserved. You're just saying, are there any shout outs that need to go out today? And so I'm a fan of scheduling and calendars and agendas in our meetings. And so my team knows that it's not a mistake that those things show up in our agendas too.
And one of the things that feedback I got many, many moons ago was that people all knew I was grateful for the work they were doing, but I wasn't always being great about saying thank you. And so I literally, for probably, I don't know what year is this, 2025, probably since like 2006 or 7, literally every Thursday morning at 9 a.m., there was a private meeting on my calendar that says gratitude. And all it means is for me to like take a pause and go, who needs a quick text from me right now? Who helped me out with something? Who do I need to send like an actual handwritten thank you note, which I do a lot of those as well. And so that's like my, like literally I snoozed it this morning because I was flying and I didn't have time to write. I didn't have any note paper with me, but there's like 3 or 4 notes that I'm going to be writing, and I moved it to Saturday morning for this week, just for my full transparency. But showing that gratitude and being really like candid about the recognition. And I think the on the spot, Lauren, is so important. Before I came to Taco John's, I spent time on the franchisee side. So I was in restaurants a lot, and we tried some of the app point things. And I think there was great intention there, but like being able to get like a Starbucks gift card for like a 18-year-old, 16, 17-year-old crew member, like that was a big deal for them. And so we actually had abandoned the app points thing and went back to our old school, like you get a budget to buy so many gift cards each month to recognize the people in your store, because that on the spot instant like gratification is huge.
Oh my gosh, I'm so stealing that calendar
Yeah.
idea. I love that. I don't know if you meant for that to be the advice in closing, but I do, let's do that really quick. I wanted everyone to kind of give sort of some parting advice to leaders that are aspiring right now, and just some parting words you'd like to give to them. And then we do have some questions in the chat that we'll address next. So what was that meant to be yours, Heather, or do you have any other advice that you would kind of?
I mean, I just think you learn from everybody around you all the time, and it's important to be continuously learning and taking that feedback into consideration. No career path is linear. If you would have told me 20 years ago I was going to be the president and CEO at Taco John's, I would have told you were crazy. So go with the flow. And the other thing I always talk about, and it's hard for women, I think, is taking risks and finding that life partner, that spouse or that better half that you have that is supportive of you and the risk that you want to take. There is nothing more important than having somebody that's supporting you at home. That's like your best friend in crime and helping you get through the tough times. But taking those risks is huge. I think for women, it's hard because a lot of us are, taking care of our families and our children, and we don't want to take those risks and those leaps. But if you don't take them, you never know what's going to happen.
All right, Satine, let's hear it, girl.
Yeah, well, it would not be Whirl if I didn't say raise your hand, plug into your community. I want you guys to send that LinkedIn connection, send that email to that person that you admire, because you have no clue what will come out of that relationship. I think networking is crucial. I think it's paramount in an industry like this. Relationships are currency. So don't be afraid, plug into Whirl or Full Course.
And speaking of, can't wait to meet you in person next week.
Yes, see you next week.
Robin, let's hear it. Some advice from you.
I think my biggest advice is really to ask for feedback from your executive team, if that's where it's appropriate, or even employees, just so you almost create an environment and a situation where you can have that open, honest dialogue, and people can actually tell you, how they feel and what they think about things and where they want to go. And, you let them know, on the other hand, that they too are important to the organization, and here's why. I think that constant reinforcement of those kinds of principles and actions just make a difference in the workplace.
Agreed.
100%.
Lauren, any final thoughts here?
Yeah, I think one of the things I learned a little late in my career, because I am a Gen Xer, I am the generation that first really started to benefit from women coming before me and breaking the glass ceiling. And so part of the tail end of my professional training was, this is how you act as a woman in corporate America. And this is no joke. My first lawyer job, when I was in law school, they still required women to wear pantyhose to work. Dead serious. I mean, this is just par for the course. But we're in a different age now. We've evolved, and I'm so excited to see sort of the subsequent generations coming behind us that are continuing to contribute and elevate in the workplace. So to that point, I have a couple of things. Number one, always show up authentically on your brand, period, full stop. If you cannot show up at work as who you are and be the best you at work, you're in the wrong seat. That's just it. That's all I got to say on that. 2, know who you are and ruthlessly self-promote to the point up to that line where it just feels disgusting. I did not ever embrace this. Like, my team knows this. I'm still weird about it. But I'm very clear on what I stand for now. I am not afraid to say those things. It took me 45 plus years on the planet to get to this point. And if you are part of one of the later generations that grew up with social media and understand your voice counts, use it, please. Like, do the rest of us a solid who help get you in that seat. Like, please speak up and be heard, because it's no longer, and this is sort of my last and final third point here, is it's no longer acceptable to just show up at work and be in the seat and in your job. You have to be you. And I think part of what we bring to work in terms of diversity is that unique perspective as women. So do not be afraid to speak up and muzzle yourself, God forbid, because you think your voice is not worthy of being heard because you're a woman. And then that is also true if you're sitting in a room full of men or the only woman on the board. I feel like sometimes I feel the obligation to speak up and to be heard clearly and succinctly because I'm one of the only ones in that room. But whether you're one or one of 100, it doesn't matter. Use that voice, please, and just be authentically you.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Appreciate that. All right. Well, we do have a couple of great questions that I do want to get to. We've got 5 minutes left. Okay. Melissa says, what is interesting in women in leadership is there seems to be more openness of strengths and blind spots and owning them and then surrounding yourself with others that help you with your blind spots. Do you think that is found more in women leaders? I believe it is a strong strength in a leader, but I can also see it being used against leaders as people call out blind spots and focus on them. There is no perfect leader. Would love your perspective on this.
Mm.
I think that people will always try to find, they'll always want to criticize you in some kind of way or say you got here because you're a woman, right? Or whatever. And I would argue that, well, Lauren, one of the things you said about self-promotion is something that I have a really, really, really difficult time with, okay? And and it's probably a skill that I need to develop at this late stage in my career. However, I do think that people want to diminish the reasons why women have achieved some of the levels in corporate America that they have achieved. And here's what I will tell you. I think we have achieved these levels because we work harder and we are more invested. And the opportunity that we have to be in the role and to be successful and to be, a good role model for other women is incumbent upon all of us. And I just, there's a side of me that says, there's no room for failure here. So I take it very seriously when I engage with somebody or I'm leading an organization or whatever it is that I'm doing, because I don't want to fail. And quite honestly, I don't want to be in a situation where I don't feel as though I can contribute value to that organization. So, there's almost a check-in point that I have with myself where I end up saying, is this really the right situation for me? And can I contribute the value that's needed for this particular organization to thrive and to grow or to achieve whatever it is that they're trying to achieve?
Anyone else have thoughts on that, or should we move to the next one?
Mic drop. I think she nailed it.
I know, I
Yeah.
kind of did too. Everyone was silent. I was like, I
I
think she
just
said
like,
the thing.
I'm
Okay.
absorbing it all.
We also had a question about this idea of self-promotion. I do think that is something a lot of women have a tough time about. Betsy wants to know, can someone give an example of self-promotion that they've engaged in that felt authentic?
I would like to take that. I think, you kind of have to let the pressure go a little bit and be okay with having some fun. So I guess a practical example for me on LinkedIn, I've sort of created this persona, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, of being a horse girl that has nothing to do with me professionally, but it's a huge part of my identity. And I've found ways to sort of connect that with my professional identity. And I actively post about my horse and I just have fun with it. And I sort of tie it to, bake it into my self-promotion and my posts and all of that. So I just have fun with it. And that's really my advice. Drop that pressure, have fun with it.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn's a great example, Satine. I think I would never ever, like maybe before 5 or 6 years ago, would never ever post anything about what I was doing or the accomplishments that I had because I felt like it was weird. And then I
Yeah.
thought about it one day and I was like, I love hearing about when Satine does something big or when Lauren does something big or when Robin does something big. Like I
Oh.
love hearing about that. And I'm like eager to promote them and to congratulate them. So why shouldn't I talk about what I'm doing? And I think those are important pieces that we need to do and just put it away. Like don't worry about what people think because people are going to talk about you no matter what you do. Like no matter what you do, people are going to talk. And so to pull a page out of Mel Robbins or whoever she may or may not have plagiarized from, let them talk about you. Like do what you got to do, own yourself, be authentic. And I think sometimes that comes with like maturity. And I'm also a Gen Xer like Lauren. And I don't know, I'm at a point in my life where I am who I am. I'm comfortable in my skin and I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. And we're going to go from there.
I agree, Heather. One time I was at Focus and I had just gotten like a particularly gnarly set of feedback. As it turns out, lots of executives don't like a general counsel telling them when they're wrong. It happens. And I remember, do you guys remember Sophia Pando? I'm going to give her a quick
Yeah.
shout out. I wonder where she is in the world today,
She's
but
in
she used to
Spain,
work
wasn't
a
she?
couple offices down from me and she saw me having a bad day and she came in and handed me a piece of paper and it said, what other people think of you is none of your business. And that sucker was taped to my computer until the day I left Focus Brands, and it's taped to my credenza right now. And I think, when you carry the weight of being the lone female executive, or you're one of just a few in a corporation, it does feel like all eyes are on you, and you start unconsciously editing your behavior to act a
100%.
certain way that is expected of you. And I really hope that's not happening as much as it did when I was coming up as a younger executive. But what I will say to that is have the courage to just show up authentically. And I think that's what I was trying to get at is like on LinkedIn, I show up as a working mom. Like, am I out there trying to develop an entire following of working moms or parents? No, but that's such a huge part of who I am right now that literally it's permeating into the way that our companies like shared agreements work. They're things I do with my own kids. So like that's authentic for me right now. Will it be how I talk in 10 years? Probably not. But it is very real that I have a precocious 5-year-old right now, and it's part of the drill,
He's
right?
super cute
So
though.
he was
It's
running
really
around at
cute.
a conference with
super
you
cute.
just the other day. So
Well, I think Lauren, the other thing that you do really well about like self-promotion is just offering thought leadership and like hot takes on things. So on LinkedIn, it's like, well, you know what your experience adds and brings to the table and like what your point of view on things are, and you'll just say it, like whatever it is you think. And sometimes that sparks conversation and not everyone has to agree with you, but you come from a place of like this is what my experience has taught me and these are my thoughts on this topic. And I mean, I think we've all seen Lauren's post and we're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah,
I actually had
agreed.
my whole team follow you because I loved some of the advice you were giving.
Well, isn't it better to have just one or two people resonate with your voice and resonate with your story versus just keeping it to yourself and feeling alone?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
that
you
is the
Just
mentioned
showing them
that.
like I think too, like as you grow in your career, like there was probably periods in my career where I didn't want to show my personality and I wanted to kind of keep that hidden. And the older I get, the less that I care about that. And so like last night I was at an event at IFA. We were at IFA this week, and one of the gals on my team had graduated from the Ascension program at the IFA, and there was a reception last night, and they were playing really great music. And I've never been a dance floor that I didn't just love. And so like the Heather of 20 years ago would have like sat in the corner and sipped on her glass of Chardonnay and like not gotten up to dance, but like I went over and danced. And then like 5 minutes later, like, that was so cool. Like, we don't know you. Who are you? And so I introduced myself. Like they looked at my name badge and they're like, you're the CEO at Taco John's and you're dancing. And I'm like, I love to dance. I'm sorry, guys. Like, I can't help myself. Like, I never met a dance floor I didn't love. But
Oh my
be
God, I
your
love you.
authentic self, no matter where you're at.
You're so amazing. And by the way, when you're a leader and you behave that way, that gives everyone else freedom to do it too. Like all the people that look up to you are like, oh cool, if Heather can do it, I can do it. which is just amazing. Oh my gosh, you guys, I could talk to you guys all
And
afternoon.
this was fun.
I know. Thank you all so much for joining. I think this was seriously such a blast. So good to hear your thoughts on things. And I really appreciate your openness and vulnerability. And y'all, just this conversation is a great example of authenticity and empathy, just showing up and like saying the things and being yourselves. So appreciate you guys so much for doing that.
Thank
And with that, y'all, have an awesome afternoon for everyone who tuned in. Thank you so much. If there's anything we can do to help you at Full Course, feel free to use this little QR code on the screen. We'd love to chat with you about helping you grow your business. And with that, thank you all so much and have an awesome afternoon.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Thank
Good
you
to
so
see you,
much.
Heather. Bye, y'all. Take care.
Bye.